Hello and welcome to Cycles of Time, your weekly guide to what's happening on Earth as we make our revolutionary journey around the sun. For time immemorial, our human ancestors have created myths and meanings to help us adapt and thrive as seasons change. Join me each week to explore the intersections of these ancient cycles, from the indigenous medicine wheel to the pagan wheel of the year, the Babylonian and Greek zodiac to the I Ching, the ancient Chinese book of changes. I'm your host, Alison Dale, and this is the Cycles of Time podcast. Hey friends, thanks for tuning in to another week in the Cycles of Time. This week's vibe is ambitious new ventures. It's your cosmic energy report for July 7th to 13th, 2025. That's Monday through Sunday. And we have a lot happening this week after a busy last weekend. We have Uranus entering Gemini on Monday, as well as a full moon in Capricorn. And those are some pretty big energies that are ruling the week this week. And so I'll dig into those in a minute. But first, a little recap into last week's energies, which I'm starting to do in a little more of a codified way, just reflections on how last week showed up. Because I feel like week by week, each week is packing such a punch during this Cancer season, midsummer here in the Northern Hemisphere. And we are moving through some pretty powerful, potent astrology transits. And the summer always has that vibe of intensity, but here we are in 2025. And looking back to last weekend was really where it all hit. Last weekend's Astro-HD was super provoking, to say the least. On the 4th of July, Venus and Uranus met up at the critical last degree of Taurus, 29 degrees Taurus. And then right after that, Venus moved into Gemini, Neptune stationed retrograde in Aries, and all the while the sun was moving through the human design gate of provocation. So last week asked a lot of us, emotionally, spiritually, and collectively. Venus and Uranus blew open old patterns around love and stability and unspoken agreements. And Neptune turning retrograde in Aries may have stirred up some kind of ancient, forgotten fog around identity and forced many of us to reckon with stories that we didn't even know we were still carrying. That's how I witnessed Neptune stationing retrograde in Aries. The sun's journey through gate 39, the gate of provocation, was stirring the waters, really drawing out the grief that we hadn't made space for and tenderness that we or I hadn't really fully felt. So it was a provoking week. There was no joke. I'd looked ahead on the calendar to the gate of provocation and was like, "Ooh, what's going to happen here?" And there was certainly some things. For me, this first week of July carried a definite charge, just felt electric and alive, and both super outward and also deeply internal. Venus, is the planet of values, conjunct Uranus, the planet of disruption, in the stable, earthy sign of Taurus, kind of triggered a quiet earthquake beneath the surface of things that I thought I understood about myself and my past and my values. And so over the past week, there's been this kind of churning wheel inside me that is tied to stability, safety, intimacy, and some unspoken agreements that really form the foundation and the scaffolding of relationships. Taurus is the sign of embodiment and wisdom of the body. And last week I felt some epiphanies that Uranus was highlighting there with his lightning bolts in my body before my mind could name them. So Uranus and Venus coming together, the very last degree of Taurus, was a kind of embodied, visceral response to disruption in what I used to value. Kind of a lot of, like I mentioned, I have Cancer in my 12th house, so all of these gates are moving through my 12th house. That's the house of the subconscious. And so it's been striking this year with so much activation in this season of other planetary alignments, how much is coming to the surface in a pretty electric way. So yeah, been moving through it. Neptune stationing retrograde in Aries on the 4th of July for me kind of came with a certain kind of vertigo feeling. I feel like Neptune in Aries doesn't really just like dream in the corner the way Neptune in Pisces did, kind of floating on the lofty seas. I think that Neptune in Aries is a lot about dissolving illusions around our identity. Aries is identity, and Neptune is dissolving illusions or dreams. And so there's a certain confrontation with Neptune and Aries about the myths that we build around who we are and why. And it's been kind of moving through Aries for the first time, getting a little bit of a taste of that spiritual warriorship sovereignty that comes with Neptune and Aries. But when Neptune stationed retrograde, and as it will be moving retrograde for quite some time, I feel like the fog of Neptune can bring a lot of fog and like lack of clarity. And it kind of didn't necessarily lift when it stationed retrograde, but it shifted directions. And all retrogrades are about reviewing and redoing, and all of the words, revising. And so with Neptune retrograde in Aries, as it moves back towards Pisces, it's this kind of first stab at reviewing in a dreamlike manner the things that Aries stands for in your chart, which is identity, which is how you move ahead with agency in the world. So a lot coming up around sovereignty and around codependence and interdependence and what it means to be a sovereign, headstrong ram individual in this world. So I think there's a lot in the collective circling around that right now, how we make it as individuals, how we make it in the collective. And with Cancer in my 12th house, I feel like a lot of these waters are always close to the surface this time of year, but I don't always realize it until they surge. And with last week's transits, there was kind of a sense of being pulled back through time to witness circumstances and relationships that once held me like a tether. And Neptune going through, this sign of identity is kind of like an untethering of what your identity might have been at one point in time. And also Uranus and Venus coming together on the same day in Taurus was a bit of a disruption of what you might have valued, what you might have held to be true, held in kind of rose-colored glasses, light for a long time. There might have just been last week, if you're anything like me, there was a lot of subterranean kind of information revealed surrounding what's true now? What's true in this current moment? Dislodging and disrupting, anything that's tethering us to the past. There's a lot of newness coming through starting last week. I was listening to Chani Nicholas, the Chani app, and I think last week's forecast was called New Beginnings. This week I'm calling this forecast Ambitious New Beginnings because the sun will be moving through the gate of beginnings starting today in human design. That's gate 53. And so last week, it was initiated. It was that kind of like pre-dawn initiation of new beginnings, being provoked into really feeling something new and digging into some things that maybe were hiding beneath the surface for a long time. So in the gate of provocation last week, I think I mentioned that the name of the gate isn't really about conflict. It is the crab showing its claws and, being forced to show its claws, kind of being forced that hand. But it's not about conflict for its own sake. It's more like provocation when you are provoked. It's a little bit of just a test of where the energy is still flowing naturally and where it's gone stagnant. We can't just be in stillness forever, waiting for something to happen. So there's a little bit of a, test from the universe to say, hey, what are you about? What are you doing? And it can definitely feel like a challenge, the gate of provocation, but I do see it more as an invitation which can come through lots of different channels. I'm curious how you all felt the gate of provocation and that Venus-Uranus conjunction in Taurus, how those showed up for you. It could have been very subtle, but something that was a mirroring to yourself, a provocation through a direct interaction, or maybe just a subtle look or a passing phrase that mirrors back something to you that makes you know that you're alive. It makes you maybe show your claws a little bit. So, on the collective level, that big, beautiful bill passing on July 3rd, right before all of these transits happened, really has moved like a stone through collective waters. And we're still unpacking, and we'll continue to unpack what this massive legislation will mean for us personally and for our country and for the world. But its impact was undeniably provoking in the week of provocation. And I feel like the air has changed significantly over the past week. Really, yeah, calling everybody into their values. Venus is values. Taurus is the space where values are held in our body. And that was bringing everything up to the surface on a collective level. Everyone's feeling it, and even if we can't really perfectly articulate the breadth and depth of what all is going to be disrupted, there was some very public disruption. And last week's signing of that bill really just revealed the belief structures that can't hold the weight being placed on them anymore. And people are being stirred into action, but not without making place for grief first. And so the provocation, the disruption, the things happening on and around last weekend, simultaneously with this Neptune retrograde of reevaluating dreams as it relates to our own agency and autonomy within the larger picture, they all kind of came together in this puzzle piece. So there has been a lot, and I really would love to hear from you how it showed up for you in your life. There didn't have to be any answers delivered. There certainly weren't any answers served up on my doorstep in an Amazon box. But with Neptune involved in the picture in the way that it is, that's rarely the case where there is a clear-cut answer. But I think Neptune helps loosen things and uncoil and unravel things. And yeah, unraveling and untethering and unweaving were major, major words in the top of my mind last week. And, sometimes we think about cord cutting ceremonies or cutting cords from old ways of being. And I think that that's oftentimes not as easy. It's easier said than done. When you cut a cord, it's destined to unravel again. And then those lots of loose ends and frays show up again. You can't have a neatly cut cord. But what you can do with a cord that tethers you to the past in a way that you might not want to be tethered is unbraid it. And that can be challenging. But when you do, you still see the kinks, and then they slowly work themselves out. Like my daughter's little friend came over and braided one of her doll's hair in a very tight braid, this yarn hair. And then my daughter said, "Can you take this out? I really don't want this braid in there anymore." And nobody could quite do it. And we all spent a lot of time. It was such a tight braid. We spent a lot of time braiding this doll's yarn hair. And yeah, when it was finally unbraided, we didn't have to cut the braid out, like her lose some hair, but we just unbraided, took turns kind of picking at it and getting frustrated in the process of doing so. But once it came unbraided, there were certain, the yarn still showed where it had been braided before. And over time, my daughter came up to me and had been very upset about this. And she came up to me and said, "Mama, look, it's gone now. I can't even tell where the braid was anymore." And so it just shows that when you deliberately unravel something and take the time to do so, that slow unwinding can help to create something that can settle a little easier rather than provoking another reaction. So anyway, doll hair aside, last week I think, there was a loosening and an uncoiling and unraveling. And through that, I was able to catch some glimpses of a new shape beginning to take form beneath what feels like a lot of static right now. And I think there's a clarity that can come when you stop trying to sort meaning out from illusion and allow them both to live in the same space. Recognizing what's changing, what do I want, what are my goals, and what is keeping me tethered to a past version of myself. And sometimes it's just such human nature, animal nature, Martian, Aries nature to want to just sever, right? And um, that feels like almost impossible right now in so many ways. And so that's not a fatalist way of putting it. It's just recognizing how can we hold the past and the future together and try to unravel to create a little bit more space to braid something new into existence. So, yeah, let me know in the comments how you're feeling after that provocative week and that bittersweet 4th of July weekend with so much happening in the collective realm. And moving on to this week, here we go. This week in the Wheel of the Year, we have the Sun moving into the gate of beginnings in Human Design Wheel of the Year on Monday. And then Uranus is leaving Taurus after 7 years and entering the sign of Gemini, the twins, until 2033. I did write horoscopes for all of the rising signs about this major transit, kind of how it will show up in your life from now until 2033. And you can find that on my Substack at cyclesoftime.substack.com. Then later in the week, I'll talk a lot about Uranus, and I'm sure you'll hear a lot if you're interested in any of this kind of stuff. It will be on the billboards, on blast, Uranus in Gemini. Really another one of these major transits of the year. And there's been a lot of them in 2025. All of the outer planets have changed signs since the end of 2024 through 2025. And so it's been like big news, top headline again and again and again throughout this year. So if it feels like deja vu right now, you're not wrong. But they're all a little bit different and they're all forming an incredibly interesting configuration in the sky together as well, which I will dive into later on in this podcast. But yeah, another thing happening is this week we have a full moon in Capricorn on Thursday. And so that's the sun in the gate of beginnings opposite the moon in the gate of ambition, the Capricorn gate of ambition. And then on Sunday, the Lord of Time, Saturn, is following Neptune's suit and stationing retrograde in Aries as well, as they kind of follow each other around the zodiac, going backwards into Pisces until they meet up again in February 2026 for their exact alignment, which is getting a lot of hype as well. So, if the deeply provoking energies of last week's events left you feeling unmoored, this week's transits might provide a perfect time to put some structure, review some structures, and put them to your goals and ambitions for the new beginnings that you want to see in your life and in the world. So onward we go. I'm not going to read through or go through every single one of the cycles of time mandala wheel transits this week because I have a lot on the agenda, but you can always find a visual aid for the cycles of time mandala that encompasses the medicine wheel, the 5-element whooshing cycle, the pagan wheel of the year, the zodiac, and the human design and I Ching wheel. And that's something that's nice to visually look at to kind of see how these are all interrelated. And it's also written out as far as where we are in each of those wheels. But we maintain fire season, Cancer season, and then have some pretty powerful astrological transits happening. So we'll start with Uranus entering Gemini until 2033 for the first time in 84 years. This is happening Monday, July 7th. It's entering this Uranus, the great lightning bolt disruptor, is entering the sign of the twins for the first time since the 1940s. And this is going to begin an 8-year journey that will really redraw our collective circuitry of communication and intelligence and the way we connect with each other. Uranus is a slow-moving planet, 84 years around the sun. And so, although faster than Neptune and Pluto. It's a slow outer moving planet, so it's a slow revealer, but it is a quick lightning bolt kind of disruptor, as I said. It like works in pulses, flashes, and rarely with permission. It's usually a bit of shock associated with Uranus. And entering Gemini, Gemini is this sign of breath, the sign of language, the sign of neural networks. This transit for the next 8 years is really bringing a long arc of upheaval in how we think, how we speak, how we learn, and how we relate to each other. Gemini is it's kind of like your siblings and your neighbors, and leaning over the fence to chat with whoever's close by and picking up all of the news from around the hood. And so Uranus coming there is going to shake up how we do that collectively and how you do that as a person, as a human. As we can see, I mean, come on, AI, we don't have to say more. Pluto in Aquarius and Neptune in the Aries and Uranus in Gemini all kind of make this AI revolution not feel as far-fetched, but it still is so incredible to me, the AI, everything, how fast it's evolved. Because I remember using Midjourney for an image creation when it first came out like a couple years ago, and it was just so bad, right? It was so like sloppy and amateur, and I kind of put it down and was like, "Nah." And then the other day I went on an AI image generator just to see what could be done. Somebody was showing it to me, and it was bananas how much has changed in such a short amount of time, and since Pluto entered Aquarius, really. And I remember using the internet for the first time when I was in 6th grade in 1996, and it was AOL Instant Messenger, and I went on there or not Instant Messenger, but the AOL CD that you get in the mail, and I went on there at school, and we were supposed to research something on this new thing called the internet for a research paper as one of our sources. We'd go to the library and do our works cited or bibliography for all of the places we got information. And so I was writing a paper about Atlantis, and I remember getting some books at the library about Atlantis and checking them out, and then being like, let me check this internet, AOL. And there was nothing about Atlantis at all. There were no web pages, nothing, 1996. And I was like, this internet, it doesn't really have much. And I remember trying to search for a few other things. And I think I shifted my search to the history of Barbies, which was a bad move because Barbies, were a sex toy originally, or modeled off of something to do with that industry. And so that's what came up, even in some kind of safe search in 1996. There was something about that I shouldn't have discovered when I was 12. But anyway, I digress. I remember just being like, the internet's going to be, this is nothing, right? And then how quickly that, by junior high for me, it was completely had taken over. But I'm one of this millennial, exennial generation between millennials and Gen X, where I can remember the first time I used the internet. And it's not just a vague memory, it's a very distinct memory. And I remember what life was like pre-internet and what life is like after. And think about my daughter sometimes, and I'm like, wow, she's forming her first real memories, and AI is here with us. So that is a big Uranus and Gemini piece. Communication, education. I mean, her school, when she was going to the public school, had just initiated and implemented AI reading tutors for kindergartners. So this is we're in it, and this will just continue to create some upheaval in how we educate ourselves. And systems that are based on speed and information are gonna splinter and reform and just drastically change. And attention will become the most unstable, but also the most sought after currency. I think that the attention economy is something that I've been familiar with for a long time, and this will just amplify how much it is important to have energetic boundaries around how you consume information and where you are learning from, because it's going to be just a frenzy. I have a feeling of information. I'm traveling all over the place, lots of new signals coming through. So get out into nature if you can, where there is not a signal. I try to do that as much as I can. I feel it, the energy shifting. I feel just more, more signals out there all around. And so getting to a place where I cannot consume or be tempted to digest it. I went to the mountains earlier today before recording this, and sat and made some fairy houses out of mullein, lamb's ears, and flowers, and just walked and like made friends with each and every thistle that I could find. These beautiful straw flowers, and it reset me in a way that I didn't know I needed. So anyway, I mean, Gemini, there were lots of butterflies and bees out there in the mountains when I was there. And Gemini, I always refer to as the pollinator energy, buzzing around from one flower to the next. And so in its higher frequency, we don't have to be so afraid of this transit. I'm not a fan of fear-mongering at all. I'm excited about this transit in some way, for sure. A kind of new energy, new disruptive energy. We can't stop it, so here it is. But in its higher frequency, it really has a genius. Gemini and Uranian energy in Gemini is about pattern recognition and bringing two things together that are dissimilar and synthesizing them and juxtaposition, and has kind of a coyote, like a trickster kind of energy to it, where we're not waiting for linear answers before moving on. It's more kaleidoscopic energy, kind of like a new dialect that emerges out of kind of like the status quo. And so that's a lot of Uranus in Gemini energy. For those of you who tune into the subtle instead of the sensational, this shift might feel very staticky at first, kind of a buzz, all those pollinators buzzing at the edge of your awareness or flickering through your dreams. And you may, as this transit starts, feel pulled in a lot of different directions, and all of them might seem very urgent. So I would say just resist the urge to anchor and to tether yourself to something too quickly, because as we just mentioned, this unraveling, this unweaving, this untethering is allowing us to rise up into the air with these pollinators and be a part of that conversation. So I would resist trying to retether too quickly out of a sense of fear or out of a sense of discomfort. Uranus in Gemini is here to teach through disruption, and the lessons of this transit are going to be lived through paradox and this willing to stay present in the in-between and hold multiple truths at once. So as much as that doesn't sound fun, try to imagine it as butterfly energy, lightning bolts, wing butterfly energy for the next 7-8 years. What's really interesting to me, I've been super fascinated lately about outer planetary configurations, as well as the precession of the equinoxes that are shifting in 2027. We're kind of shifting to a new gate, a new part of the sign of Pisces in 2027, which is a huge prophecy in the human design world. And looking at these larger cycles, these outer planet cycles, as well as like the Earth's wobble on its axis cycle that takes 25,000 years, 29,000 years to happen. There's a lot of attention right now on these larger, grander cycles. And I'm going to be doing some special bonus episodes and write-ups about the 2027 shift, as well as about the Pluto-Neptune-Uranus triangle. But I'll give you a little taste of it now, because as Uranus moves into Gemini, it is making a magic triangle. It's called lots of things: a mini grand trine, or a minor grand trine, a talent triangle, a magic triangle, or a triangle of revolution, I've heard it called. And it's basically where Pluto is in Aquarius. Uranus is now in Gemini. Those make a trine to each other across the wheel. And then Neptune is right at the midpoint between them, currently with Saturn, but Saturn will move on quicker. So for the next 4 years or so, from 2025 into 2029, starting this week, Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus are making this triangle configuration in the sky that is incredibly rare and hasn't happened for thousands of years in this exact same way. And so Uranus is the last of the outer planets to change signs over the course of the last 8 months or so. And Pluto, Saturn, Neptune, and Jupiter all have moved from one sign to another within the past several months. So Uranus changing signs this week is like the final puzzle piece that kind of locks in a really rare planetary configuration into place for these next several years, this magic triangle. And this triangle is highlighting masculine air and fire signs of Aquarius, Aries, and Gemini, whereas for the past several years with Neptune and Saturn in Pisces and Pluto in Capricorn and Uranus in Taurus for the last, 7 to 15 years, we have had a lot of outer planetary energy in feminine earth and water signs. And so now there's just this massive shift where all of a sudden we're at this beginning degree, pulling the curtains back on a new play, which is a fire, air, kind of masculine, go forth, change things, move fast, break things kind of energy. And it's wild, this little triangle. Pluto is in the early degrees of Aquarius, trine Uranus, like I said, and then Neptune and Saturn are both right at that midpoint in the first degrees of Aries, both going to be stationing retrograde, but coming back to this point. So with the retrogrades of these outer planets, it won't always be exact, but there is a very powerful, it stays pretty exact for a long time. It'll stay within a 2-degree orb for over 45 weeks. So this is pretty powerful, and it'll be again in effect until 2029. And the outer planets do often kind of come together in patterns, but they definitely don't always form triangles. And the last time Pluto was in Aquarius, there was not this triangle. The last time Uranus was in Gemini, this triangle didn't exist, or the time before that, or the time before that. And so, although you probably have heard about a lot of things like how Uranus in Gemini has indicated the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, entering into World War II. There have been several, battles and wars associated with Uranus and Gemini. So that's not off the table at this point by any means. However, the configuration, the aspects between all of these outer planets has never been in this harmonious trine and sextile formation. So there's a little bit of hope there as far as something new coming through. And this configurations between the three outer planets don't usually last as long as this one is peaking with the most exact aspects first around August to September of this year. So in about a month, all the planets will be at 1 degrees of their respective signs, Aquarius, Aries, and Gemini. And that'll kind of click it into action. Then July 2026, they'll be exact again in that trine, and then June 2027, they will be exact. And then again, within orb, so still in this configuration, even if they're not exact for the rest of the time. So it's going to be between 1 to 8 degrees of Aquarius, Aries, or Gemini. So if you have any planets or points in those signs at those degrees, this could definitely affect you more than others. So more on that. According to astrologer Gary Muse, he says that in astrology, we study the cycles of the 3 slow-moving outer transpersonal planets, Neptune, Pluto, and Uranus, as the key markers of our collective experience through history. These outer planets have long orbits. Pluto is 248 years, Neptune is 164 years, and Uranus is 84 years. And so it's an extremely rare event when all 3 outer planets change signs. And this is in between 2024 and 2026. They're all changing signs. And these are the significators for a collective evolution and processes. He goes on and says, additionally, during 2025 to 2028, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto align in a supportive minor grand trine, this magic triangle, transiting from more passive water and earth signs to energetically active and outward directed air and fire signs. Just to get an idea about the length of cycles, the last time all of these 3 planets came together in a triple conjunction was in 578 BC, the time when our modern era civilizations were born. So now 2,500 years later, they align again with Neptune at the midpoint, marking a watershed moment in history, a breaking point for us all. The possibility of war and destruction competes with the possibility of world peace and the awakening of a global consciousness. So we're on the precipice with the great dreamer and the great illusionist magician Neptune at the midpoint of this configuration. So if you're feeling confused, or if your dreams have been really intense, or if you're simultaneously holding new earth possibilities of a radical paradigm shift along with the potential for massive horrifying destruction at the exact same time, kind of all the time right now, that's not uncommon. You're not weird. There's nothing wrong with you. That is very much where we're at. And it's exhausting, and there's just so much. But there's lots of takes on what this harmonious trine and sextile energy between the three outer planets will mean for humanity. And a lot of them are positive, I will say. I've read through the internet. I went on a deep dive for as many articles as I could find about this triangle, because it's so rare. And so I'll read a few of astrologers' interpretations just to kind of get an idea of the languaging. And I am just going into this because it's fascinating to me. And this Uranus into Gemini is really activating this whole thing for the next several years. So it's very important. The Astrology King website says that this magic triangle is the most positive, significant, and consequential planetary alignment in our lifetimes and this century. Mary Dodd, astrologer, says this minor grand trine signals an era when creativity and invention soar to unprecedented heights, urging humanity to align with higher ideals, innovate boldly, and evolve toward a more connected and inspired collective future. At such pivotal degrees, this could indeed herald the spiritual awakening or evolution that has been prophesied. All right. Very popular astrologer Molly McCord says, this is the next renaissance. This is rebirth. This is renewal. This is a fast-moving, accelerated energy of dynamic change, and possibly that takes us into the new experiences on the planet that we're creating as this new cycle begins. And the new cycle is Neptune at the first degree of the entire zodiac in this middle point of these other two outer planets. So a lot of positive optimism there from several astrologers and many more that I could quote, but I won't go on. It is new earth, dawning of a new era, age of Aquarius, kind of pre-dawn of the age of Aquarius. And I'll get into that in a separate post as well, because I've been writing a post about the 2027 shift, which is when the precession of the equinoxes moves into the final gate of Pisces. So it's actually, we're not entering the age of Aquarius. We're entering the final last stage of the age of Pisces, the last 400 years of the age of Pisces. And that's a little bit different. It's like a culmination of this Piscean age. And I'm really excited to talk to you about it. So anyway, that'll come soon. Here we go. Neptune as the center of the minor grand trine with Pluto in Aquarius and Uranus in Gemini is acting as an energetic pivot point in these larger processes of global transformation. We have Pluto in Aquarius working on deep structural collective shifts in what it means to be human, essentially. And then Uranus is really going to activate rapid changes in how we think and communicate in Gemini. But then Neptune is there as that apex point, the center of the triangle, and is filtering both Uranus and Pluto through this Neptunian field of intuition and imagination and potential and dreams and the vast infinite ocean, Poseidon's ocean. It's at the very, very beginning, the 0 degree point of the zodiac is where Neptune is meeting up with Saturn in the middle of these two other outer planets. And Neptune is going to like I said earlier, dissolving what no longer fits and opening up space for something new to emerge. I guess one way to unravel that braid would have been to like dissolve it in some acid or something. Like that is another clean way to go, to soak it in water so long that it just kind of organically unbraids itself. And so that is what Neptune does here is unravels through a slow process um, of water, I will say. So it definitely in doing that, you don't know how you're not actively doing the thing, but it is happening. So it could bring uncertainty and inspiration all at once this next several years. Kind of duh. And it's shaping the emotional and spiritual tone of changes that could otherwise be too mental or mechanical. And part of the 2027 shift in human design is that there is a kind of a change in the solar plexus emotional processing center in our bodies. This is what the theory is that we're going to stop being such mental, logic based, hierarchy based creatures and actually get a lot from the emotional realm. And Neptune, associated with water, associated with the great seas, and Poseidon is tied to the tides of emotion. In the same way that the Luna, the moon, makes the tides, Neptune is kind of a larger octave of that, where Neptune is in charge. Neptune is in the beginning point here, and everything that is being disrupted and communicated in new ways are flowing through Neptunian filters and lens, so that whatever future takes shape has to pass through this sensitive emotional realm and not just exist in these air signs mental realm. Like Aquarius is very mental, Gemini is very mental. They're like Saturnian and Mercurial energies, where there's a lot of facts and figures, or at least a lot of chatter. But then Neptune's right there in the middle saying, hey, where I'm beginning the new cycle, and it is going to be more about emotional intelligence and perception and creativity. So, as we all dream into new collective futures, Uranus and Pluto in the air signs are going to help us think radically new thoughts in both our sovereign minds with Uranus and Gemini and as a collective organism with Pluto and Aquarius. But they're going through that filter, they're kind of going downstream into the realm of Neptune, which is like, okay, all of these new thoughts are great, but like how does it show up in your body, in your feelings, in a transcendental way of knowing that's beyond the linear and beyond the logical. So wow, I didn't even know I would go off that much. Yeah, cool, crazy stuff, both and all the things. Something else that's really wild that just came up on a social media feed related to this Uranus ingress into Gemini is that both DJT, Donald Trump's chart, and the chart for the United States, the July 4th, 1776 Sibley chart, for the birth of the USA, they both have their Uranus in Gemini. And so this means that in the next several years, as Uranus goes further down into Gemini, both the current president and the USA will experience the Uranus return, which is something that happens every 84 years when Uranus comes back to that place in the sky where it was when you were born, when the country was born. And so these transits, mark it feels poignant to say these transits mark a turning point in the country's story. We just had America's Pluto return, Pluto coming back to the same place that it was during the Declaration of Independence in 1776, and that is still kind of in the air. And then also we have Uranus in 2027 will come back to the exact point in Gemini where it was when the United States was founded. So, in its current incarnation anyway. So, here's hoping that this new Earth and rebirth energy of the magic triangle will open us up to a full-on paradigm shift from anything we've ever known before, and, prove to us that history doesn't repeat itself, but it does, kind of echo. And there are some similarities, but we are in new a new geometry right now. So hold on to your butts. Quote Jurassic Park, one of my favorite movies. It is a time to, hold on to your butts. Be in your body. Be aware of your embodied responses, because this shift in communication and the shift in collective agency has a lot to do with our ability to be in our bodies in a new way. Yes. Moving on a little bit from all that, this week as Uranus shifts signs, the sun is moving through the human design gate of beginnings, which feels pretty perfect. It's gate 53. And that's happening on Monday, the ingress from the change from the sun in gate of provocation to the gate of beginnings. And this is known, Christy Inge, human design analyst that I like a lot, calls it the alchemical spark. It's like a sacred opening. It's a kind of root energy that nudges a seed towards sprouting. The gate of beginnings comes right after the gate of provocation, where we might have been shown some potentially painful truths last week, or been provoked into what's alive for us, been provoked to like get our claws out and say what's alive for us right now. And so the gate of beginnings starts this week with a little more patience and persistence. It's all about kind of the knowing that every threshold crossed is a ritual, and that growth is a promise that we make with time. It's a spiralic energy of beginning something in the way of planting a seed and not rushing that new beginning. In the I Ching, it's known as gradual progress or development, and so it embodies the energy of initiation, growth, and the potential for new ventures to occur. It definitely represents the urge to start something brand new and to take this newfound revelation that we got after our sitting in stillness and then being provoked into a new kind of understanding last week. This is this following through from that energy towards, okay, what is the first step towards integrating this new vision into a new beginning? And in the body graph, it's located in the root center, and it emphasizes the importance of timing and the ability to recognize the right moment to begin a new endeavor. It calls for the willingness to start from scratch and build momentum from there and take necessary steps towards growth, while also navigating the challenges of persevering through the heat of the summer and the rest of the year. It's like all of a sudden the days are getting shorter, and we're starting to feel it after, a couple gates after the solstice. And we're starting to recognize, like, okay, we've got to start planning a little bit for the future, planting the seeds, so to speak, a metaphorical seed for the shorter days and longer nights. In the gene keys, the shadow of 53 is inertia, and it teaches us to transcend the inertia of the external world by embracing expansion, which is the gift level, and also taking thoughtful, inspired action. It reminds us that true success and abundance is the city, really come from not rushing forward impulsively, but nurturing the seeds that we plant and allowing them to grow in an organic way. So, with Uranus moving into Gemini and the sun in the new beginnings this week, there's a tone set for this new chapter this year where radical ideas planted slowly, with reverence will grow. And you can't rush the future. It can't show up sooner than, we can't have an answer sooner than we can, right? So, with Uranus and Gemini, there'll be these new ways of speaking and relating and learning that are already emerging and will just continue to emerge. And, I think that it's really easy in times like this to want to know what's going to happen with all that. Like, what is all this mean? What is this like massive shift into the realm of this new communication and this new way of processing and digesting information? Like, what's it going to pan out to be? But we can't really know it all at once, and you'll get flashes of insight or just tiny shifts in how you go about your life. And so pay attention to what surprises you. And I've been telling people in readings lately, kind of working with people as I do astrology and human design readings, about like It's come up several times, this idea of just with so much information and so many new things. I think a lot of us are probably like, I don't want a new beginning anymore. Like you say that every week. What are you talking about? But I think that as there's so much fray, so much data flowing around, so many changes happening, going about throughout your day with moments of presence where you zoom into the present moment and see and feel and taste and touch, sensually involve yourself in the world around you and see what comes through. A passage in a book, something that somebody says in passing, write it down, draw a little picture in a notebook of a flower that you see. Anything that feels like it's rising to the surface right now it's a beautiful thing to kind of put it on your proverbial altar. You could put it on a real altar, an actual object or image that felt meaningful to you, or just draw it, write it down, make a note of it in your mental altar, in your altar in your heart, because those things that linger with us or that return again and again in quiet moments are signals, and they are the information that is relevant right now. So let that be the Neptune retrograde assignment. Make that altar, physical or the imaginal one, and gather what the things that are standing out to you in this moment of abundant information. Know that what begins this week in the Gate of Beginnings might seem really small, and it could be as simple as a question that comes into your mind, or a conversation, or just some tug towards a new and unfamiliar way of being or person. But yeah, no, it's a seed week. Beginnings are never really small, and they carry entire futures of entire organisms inside them. So, yeah, this week in the Gate of Beginnings with Uranus and Gemini and this whole configuration, listen with your whole body and breathe space around your thoughts. Do the nature trip if you can. Go on a walk, take a little notebook, do some audio recording, and welcome the stirrings of a new intelligence that can hold paradox and that can speak in imaginal realms and liminal spaces, and one that doesn't necessarily have to be explained to be understood. The little seed, you look at it, you don't know everything that's going to happen with that, but you accept the seed for what it is. You know that it is something that's important, even though you don't know the entire genetic programming of what it will end up being. So there's some contemplations for this week of new beginnings. One is, how can I recognize the right moment to begin a new project or venture in my life? Ask yourself if you're hesitating due to fear or if you're rushing into things without proper consideration. And ask, how can I approach new beginnings with patience and consistency to allow for natural growth and eventual abundance? Next up, here as we move through the week, we have a full moon in Capricorn on Thursday in the Gate of Ambition. So this is lighting up Gate 54. Ambition across the sky from the sun in Cancer in 53, the Gate of Beginnings. So this is a beautiful polarity, the seed of new beginnings and the ambition for something to happen fast, to know what it's going to be. So this full moon could be a time when your inner stirrings, your inner seeds are seeking an outer manifestation. They want to be a tree. They want to be a plant, a full-grown plant. But emotional seeds that you plant in silence are kind of being paralleled with the structures of the world and where the seeds you're planting are going to fit into the world in that sense of ambition and worldliness. Capricorn is the mountain goat that climbs up the top of the mountain, and it's a winter sign. So here we are in late middle of midsummer in the heat, not necessarily thinking about the top of the mountain, but really just kind of being in the present moment as much as we can and are in this season, tending to the things directly around us and planting some new seeds. But then on the other side of the sky, it's reminding us of the season of winter where we're climbing, we are hustling, we are doing everything we can to make sure that all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, and aiming for the top of the peak. So, as I just said, the gate of beginnings relates to slow spiraling path of growth, the summer type growth, where what begins has to be nurtured with patience and presence and the willingness to let cycles unfold in their own time. So, we feel that with the sun there this week. But on the other side of the sky, the full moon in the gate of ambition has uh, a bit more about hierarchy and rising within collective systems and the complex path that is required for that. It's known in the I Ching as the marrying maiden, kind of talking about in the ancient Chinese storyline about a maiden who marries her way upward, kind of concubine into empress vibes, marrying up and having that ambition to do so. And under this full moon, ambition is really highlighted by the sun for what it is, which is either a grasping towards status and approval, a grasping towards having something in its complete form when it's still a seed, or a sacred drive to embody the care that's required in this Cancer season to get to that point where you can serve something larger than yourself. So the full moon has the shadow of greed. The gate of ambition has a shadow of greed, the gift of aspiration, and the city of ascension. And that's opposite the shadow of immaturity for the gate of beginnings, the gift of expansion, and the city of superabundance. So that's interesting to look at the like shadows in parallel or in polarity to each other, where one, if you're too ambitious, you are greedy, and if you are not ambitious enough and you're always just thinking of only of beginnings, you're immature. But in the gift level, having aspirations is in a Capricornian way that this full moon is showing is super, super important in order to contribute to something larger than yourself. And then the gift of expansion with the gate of beginnings is parallel. It recognizes that something will grow if you allow it to in its natural cycle, just naturally. So together, the polarity between these Cancer and Capricorn gates holds a deep evolutionary tension. One side wants to begin anew organically, Cancer vibes, and the other wants to rise through the existing ranks, Capricorn side. So the sun is calling for emotional presence and a slow unfolding, and then the moon is reflecting back the pressure to make something real, to climb, and to prove. So in both of the polarity's highest expressions, which is revealed during a full moon, we get both of these energies mirroring each other back. But they both offer a transformative quality where there is an inner abundance that naturally expands into outer ascension. That's the flow of energy, is to not crave, is to not rush, is to not need something to happen faster than it can. So to be rooted in patience and rooted in your own truth, but open to the fact that you might one day be a massive tree on the top of a mountain. Yeah, that is the full moon. Let your ambitions meet a new beginning this this full moon, and let your goals and your whatever it is that you're currently initiating meet up, but making sure that it's aligned with your current version of yourself. After that reevaluation of values last week with the Venus Uranus conjunction, after there's a little bit of a shakeup there, like it's time to initiate something new, redefine goals, listen closely to yourself, and tune into what meaningful new beginnings are already happening in your life and how you can nurture those to be the most to fill any kind of potential that you might see for them. So again, with Uranus entering Gemini and connecting with all the other outer planets in this triangle, and then with the sun in the gate of beginnings and the moon in the gate of ambition, this week's energies truly do feel like the dawn of a new era energy for us, both personally and collectively. And the final thing I'll talk about quickly is that on Sunday, we have this transit where Saturn is also stationing retrograde in Aries following Neptune. And this is going to allow us to, again, reflect, reevaluate, revision, all the rewords related to structures. related to hierarchies, related to containers. Those are all Saturn words related to guidelines and rules that can hold all of these new beginnings in any sort of coherent form. So it's cool that right after the full moon that is ruled by Saturn, Capricorn, full moon in Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, and then Saturn and Capricorn have similar big daddy kind of rule maker energies, structure energies. And so the fact that right after that, we get this Saturnian hit, this Capricornian hit from the full moon that's like, hey, in all these new beginnings and all this Neptunian soup, don't forget that you also have goals. Don't forget that you soon enough will have to, figure out how to get to the top of the craggy peak. And so then right after that, Saturn goes retrograde in Aries, which allows us to not just to think a little deeper, to reflect a little more on what that Capricorn full moon was telling us on Thursday. And yeah, it's a point of reflection for the next several weeks until September 1st. It'll go back into Pisces on September 1st and then stay there until it re-enters Aries on February 13th of next year. But up until September, throughout the summer, as Saturn is retrograde through Aries, it asks us to reflect on areas of our life where we might be struggling to take ownership of our desires, or where we've been overly impulsive or holding back, or kind of even aggressive in asserting ourselves in that Aries way. It's a good period of reflection on how we show up with our own independence, our own sense of self, how we assert ourselves in the world, the structures around our ambition. And, Aries is a bold, dynamic, and action-oriented sign, and Saturn is all about responsibility and long-term planning. So during this retrograde, we can introspect a little bit and revisit the ways that we set our boundaries and take action toward our personal goals. So the key during Saturn's retrograde in Aries and Neptune's retrograde in Aries is slowing down a bit, reviewing your goals, reviewing your ambitions, and letting them grow naturally a little bit from this gate of beginnings here. Be honest with yourself about where you might be holding back or acting out of fear, or impatience is a big one for Aries. So, it can feel a little bit frustrating to have Saturn retrograde, especially in Aries, but it does provide an opportunity to refine your strategy and make sure that your actions are rooted in a long-term sustainability, that super abundant natural growth spilling out of the container rather than just checking off the boxes of short-term wins. So during this period, starting Sunday onward through September, cultivate patience and just reconsider your approach to independence and leadership. And you can lay a solid foundation for when Saturn stations direct again. So I listed on my Substack some contemplations for this week. If you want to do some journaling, it's a great week to journal, a great week to plant some literal seeds, to plant some figurative seeds. One of the questions is, what is quietly beginning in me right now that doesn't yet have a name? Am I planting seeds with presence or trying to skip to the harvest? What relationships or roles am I still tethered to, even if their form has already changed? And what does true aspiration, feel like in my body? Notice where it moves, where it lives, and tap into that feeling of aspiration as different from ambition as we approach all of this new information. So there's been a few things I've suggested. Take what you like and leave the rest. Take what resonates, leave the rest, as always. But there's a lot going on right now. There's a lot of energy, and there's a lot of words, and there's a lot of feelings, and there's a lot of conversation and desire for things to be back. We all know it's not going back how it used to be, but it's also not gonna jump to a new future either without being in this particular space that we're in. So take some time for yourself, take some breaths, take some walks, slow down as much as you can when you can, and let some of these contemplations ripple through your week. And just when you notice what rises to the top, put it in your altar, put it in your heart. And I will talk to you all again very soon for next week. next week's forecast. And as always, you can find me at astrosomatics.com to book a reading. I have limited availability, but I do have some availability for human design and astrology or Astro-HD readings, where we look into all of these different considerations. And you can find me at Cycles of Time podcast and Astrosomatics on Instagram, or subscribe to the Substack at cyclesoftime.substack.com to get this podcast in your inbox every Monday, along with some more goodies. And there you can also sign up on astrosomatics.com for the next Astro Breathwork journey, which is happening on July 30th at 5 p.m. MST. And these monthly sessions that I do are deep dives into the season at hand, the zodiac season, the elementals, the archetypes, the correlations in the body and the life cycle, the human design gates of the season, kind of do a nice overview, and then do a nice conscious connected breathwork session to allow these energies and these concepts to move through our body and embrace. Leo season 1 is going to be all about inner radiance, your inner light. And it's a breathwork session I really like to host because you can feel that radiance when you're breathing as your lungs cradle your heart, and you can feel your heart beating in a different way, being that tapped into your body. And yeah, it feels lovely. So join us. You can register at astrosomatics.com or on Substack. And if you'd like to join every month for those sessions and also get annual calendar for all the transits in Astro-HD that you can embed into your Google Calendar, as well as a guidebook for each season ahead, that's like a 45-page guidebook for the season ahead, you can join as a member and get access to all that. My membership tier, a paid subscriber tier on Substack, is called Embody the Revolution, and it's only $8 a month. So come become a paid subscriber, upgrade if you're not. I'd love it. But otherwise, I will just continue to talk to you through the airwaves and send out the energies of the week as the wheel continues to turn. So have a beautiful, beautiful week ahead. Take care of yourselves. Bye.